Welcome to the Inkle Expert Access Series. Today we're speaking to Mark Miller, CEO at Connective. Connective is a nonprofit organization with a mission to strengthen our communities by supporting people facing barriers with dynamic, innovative, person-centered programming. Mark has worked in nonprofit organizations since 2009, including YMCA of Northern BC, Chimo Community Services, and John Howard Society. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, before we get into the questions, can you just take a minute to walk me through your background in a bit more detail?
Sure. As you said, I started with nonprofits in 2009. Before that, I had worked for many years in government and eventually made my way from government to the airport world and worked more on the corporate side of airports for a number of years, and then made a decision to move to the nonprofit world in 2009. And it's been a good combination of skills that I think really work well, and sort of I'm able to approach some things in the nonprofit world, perhaps based on some of the experience acquired elsewhere. And it's been a great fit. I enjoy it.
Lovely. Okay, so tell me a bit about Connective, the organization's mission, and how you've seen the need for services change in the last couple of years.
For sure. So Connective, we work with individuals that perhaps find themselves at the intersection of justice, health, housing, employment, and intellectual disabilities at times. So really, we've evolved from an organization that perhaps was singular focused and to an organization now that just finds ways to provide some of those wraparound supports. I know it gets overused, but really finding ways to try to provide those services to the same group of people. So we haven't necessarily shifted our mission to new people. It's just finding new ways to provide services as the needs of those people evolve. And I think that's really been critical always, but more so, more than ever as we come through COVID. And certainly the needs of people have shifted, needs of communities have evolved, and probably sadly the volume of needs have increased. So that's a bit about us.
Very good. And is there anything unique about how Connective structures support functions like HR, IT, and finance that's maybe perhaps different than what you would normally see in a nonprofit?
Yeah, there probably is. I think for many years, probably something that inhibited our growth or was challenging for us was consistently finding the level of finance person that we needed in particular. It was challenging to make investments in IT when we perhaps, were we large enough to make those investments? We couldn't always recruit the people that we required. So we consciously, I think, decided to make some investments in those areas. We recognized that, our strategic plan is pretty simple. It's to serve more people in more communities, engage partnerships, and then find ways to sustain it. So invest in sustaining our organization and the people that work in our organization. So, partnering with a company like Inkle we did that probably in the early days of COVID. It was a challenging period of time, and yet we made a decision to things weren't working, and we needed to do things differently than we'd ever done them, perhaps, and so made that decision. At the same time, we invested in quality finance people in the organization, and it's really made a huge difference for us, and just really allowed us to accelerate our growth, but really that growth is a proxy for just being able to serve more people, and so it's been very good for us for sure.
Okay, so COVID happened. In what ways has this impacted nonprofits just across Canada generally?
Well, I think it's impacted everyone, every industry in a huge way, but certainly the nonprofit industry. There's nonprofits that are very much, I think, struggling. in many of the sort of traditional challenges that nonprofits faced have just been magnified, and certainly I think many of the challenges that people we serve faced have been magnified. So it's a difficult period of time when you have more people in our communities needing services, and at times we're not able to respond as a sector in the ways we'd like to respond, and that puts more strain on organizations, more strain on the people in the organizations. So I think it's a very challenging time, perhaps for many nonprofits, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I've read that the 170,000 registered Canadian charities have lost an estimated $10 billion since COVID started. Do you think that there should be some form of government bailouts for charities?
Well, I think that's a tricky question. I think again that multiple sectors have had struggles. I think it's certainly. I think to some degree, yes, I guess, but to some degree, no. I think clearly, are 170,000 nonprofits in Canada sustainable? And perhaps they're not. And I don't think there's an easy answer to that, but I do think the health of the sector prior to COVID probably needed some work, not unlike lots of sectors in Canada. So I think a combination of perhaps reviewing how is the sector functioning in Canada, and then coming out of that, perhaps some type of assistance to key nonprofits and communities that communities require to maintain their social structure, I think would be an important one to look at. But I think it's also a period of time where I think it's incumbent on nonprofits to find new ways to do things as well, like other sectors in our communities.
Right. So in 2018, the Canadian government unveiled plans for a social finance fund, which is a $755 million pool for charities and social entrepreneurs to draw from to grow and scale their impact. How could or should the fund be used to support COVID recovery, if at all?
That's a good question. Again, I think those types of investments are important. Again, I feel at times they probably, with 170,000 nonprofits that might be competing for those dollars, they can really get divided up into amounts that aren't as meaningful and aren't as that perhaps nonprofits aren't as able to do as much with. So I think finding ways to invest in those key pieces that assist with social challenges in communities, ensuring that it's represented well across communities, I think is important. And probably perhaps if some of those investments are for the future as well. So I think that attaching some plans for nonprofits to some of those investments that are future focused rather than just bailing out the current situation, I think is an important piece as well.
Yeah, that's great. So in nonprofit organizations, donors give restricted funds for specific projects, and those funds cannot be reassigned in any way. Do you think that should change to better enable organizations to be more agile?
Yeah, I do. I think clearly, nonprofits, at times we put money away, whether that's donations or small profits, if you will, from annual revenues, and we create reserves, and then we make it challenging to access those reserves. And clearly, if COVID wasn't our day moment, I'm not sure what is. And so had some of those funds been more accessible, and were agencies able to perhaps invest in pieces that help them at the moment, but again, also I think invest in the future. I think that would be not unlike a corporate structure where you have funds that you're able to invest in shifting your business model, growth, emergency situations, whatever that might be. I think having that flexibility certainly would be helpful for sure.
Okay. So also with COVID came this mass shift to all things online, but with that comes a cost, both financial and human. So two questions. Is online here to stay, so to speak? And how do nonprofits deal with the additional costs of the technology required to move things online?
Well, I think online is here to stay, and I think it probably presented a real opportunity for nonprofits to do things differently. We were probably fortunate we'd invested in Zoom technology almost 2 years before COVID hit. So for us shifting to online, while it was, there were some challenges, we were pretty far down that road already, I think it continues to function well for us. It's allowed us to serve communities that we never would have been able to serve before in different ways. I think we're at a place in time now where we're trying to somewhat figure out, what is the right amount of in-person contact and what does that look like. I don't think as a human serving agency that will ever eliminate the need to get together as people. But, for us, it's allowed us to have our administrative workforce be spread out in different locations, not just across the province and territory, but across the country. And that's really sort of opened us up to different new staff that we never could have engaged before. So, I think we've invested in it. We're going to continue to invest in it. I think, I believe it's just a new way for an organization to evolve to serve more people and serve community needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So as we're starting to cope with COVID, we're now faced with notable shifts in the economy. So it stands to reason that donations will be lighter than normal for the foreseeable future, yet the need is likely to rise. How do you see this unfolding?
Well, I think it's going to be a struggle for our sector, but we won't be alone in that struggle. I think clearly, again, the word unprecedented probably gets used too often. They're maybe not unprecedented times from a financial perspective, but I think we do have, perhaps generations that haven't seen some of the interest rates that we're going to see in the next while, and certainly the cost of housing continues to increase. I think every sector is and every community is going to face some of those struggles. And then as well, it does increase the burden on nonprofits because more people need our services. And so I think it will be challenging. Again, I think it's an opportunity for nonprofits to look at perhaps new ways to do things. Really, we've looked at things as an agency like, we've had the good fortune to own property in Vancouver and have those pretty valuable. And so, can we leverage some of those properties to make investments in other communities or to make investments in IT infrastructure? So really trying to approach it from a business perspective to say we're at a period of time that's challenging, but what do we have that we can not just, get through now, but and also position ourselves for the future to be stronger than ever. So, it's challenging, but I think it's also an opportunity for the sector to really step up and do things perhaps differently than we've done before. And I think that's part of the sector we have to evolve. The needs of the people we serve continue to evolve, and communities are. So, I think we need to continue that as well.
Okay. And do you think that we'll see more merging or collaboration between nonprofits as a way to survive the current situation?
I hope so. I think it's critical. I really do think it's critical. Again, I think we probably have more nonprofits than we can sustain, or that we can sustain in a really healthy, meaningful way. I think a lot of times we're sometimes very singular focused as agencies, and we say, we talk about mission drift and things like that. And I think that's important, but I also think we also need to recognize that the people we're serving, their needs change and evolve, and communities need their needs change and evolve, and we have to as agencies as well. I think the people we serve probably, don't want us competing with other nonprofits, and how can we find ways to work together, collaborate? And I think mergers make a lot of sense. It's there's areas where it's harder to get board members, harder than ever. It's harder to get skilled finance people, skilled IT people. And yet we're again dividing that skilled labor pool between thousands of nonprofits, and it's a challenging situation. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm hopeful that we will find ways to work together more, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so last question: what other thoughts do you have about the post-COVID world for nonprofits?
What other thoughts? Well, I think right now, it's definitely a challenging period of time, but I do think both provincially, territorial government, and federally, we're continuing to see investments in social challenges in our communities. So, I think while the needs are increasing, we have been fortunate to have government that is investing in some of those social needs. So I'm optimistic that that will continue, and I think the challenges our communities face right now. We're a bit of an interesting agency in that we work in multiple communities. And we talk about that many of our challenges are similar. The size and scope and scale might be different based on the size of your community, but most of the communities are facing similar challenges right now. So, and I think government is trying to invest in those, trying to come up with ways to make investments in those. So, I think the labor force continues to be a challenge, and staffing. But that's not unique to our sector. So I think I'm optimistic that nonprofits are resilient. They'll continue to respond to the needs of the communities, and we'll push through this.
Very good. Okay, Mark, thank you so much for your time today. I know that your insights around all of the changes that nonprofits are facing will be a great listen for many of the folks grappling with where things are headed and how to manage through it. So thank you again, and all the best to you and the team at Connective.
Great. Thanks for having me.